guys, it's Madison, and today I'm asking the question, is it good for you to learn a language full-time? I realize that this is kind of a frivolous question and that who has the time to study a language full-time? I do. At least right now, I'm in between big life situations. I finished my job contract last October, and this fall I'll be doing my next big thing, whether or not that's either another job or going to a PhD program. I'm not sure yet. But anyway, for this weird, I guess it's almost 10 months of time, I'm just working part-time online and spending most of my time at home with free time. So, yeah, I have a lot of free time. So theoretically, I could be learning a language full-time right now if I wanted to. Of course, that begs the question, do I even want to? I've always loved learning languages, not gonna lie about that. It's always been a fun hobby of mine. Well, always, since middle school. But yeah, so I've had this passion for learning languages for a long time, and throughout college, I often thought to myself, it'd be kind of cool if I could just learn languages as my job. If someone could just pay me to study languages. I don't want to be a translator or an interpreter. I don't want to do that. It's work. What I want to do is just study languages. But as it turns out, it doesn't seem to be a viable job currently to have someone pay you to study languages for fun. But there is this thing that I've been seeing floating around on the internet. A little bit, I think on Twitter is where I saw it first, called the 40-hour 7-day language challenge, where basically you take a week and you try to study your target language for 40 hours that week. I don't know, when I see challenges like this, I always think that's not for me. Just because I don't like obligations, if that makes sense. So like I said, I've always liked studying languages and I like doing it as a hobby. And although I have had the thought, I wish I could just study languages as my job, I also very strongly dislike the idea of having to do something every day. So for example, Duolingo streaks, or just anything that has a streak or a daily habit kind of situation. I'm just really bad at those things because I suck at having habits. I'm more of a, let me study what I want to, when I want to kind of a language learner. And it worked for me. Learning Korean, it took me a while because of that, but it worked and I had fun along the way, and I never felt like I had to learn Korean for some reason, that I had to do a certain thing every day, anything like that. I just did what I felt like doing in Korean when I felt like doing it, and conveniently, it helped me become fluent in Korean. So even though I've always thought, in the back of my head, it'd be cool to have learning languages be my job, when I actually think about being required to spend multiple hours a day studying a language, or 40 hours a week or whatever studying a language, that gives me anxiety. It's not good. That's not to say that the 40-hour 7-day language challenge is a bad thing, where you take that week to try and spend all that time in your target language. I'm sure it's great for your learning, but for me personally, my studying personality, I think it'd be really bad for me. Because the second that I have to start counting my hours or have it reach a certain amount a day, unless it's 10 minutes, and honestly, even if it's 10 minutes, the second I have to try to do an hour or something a day, I'm oh, I don't want to do that. It instantly demotivates me. Maybe the first day or two, I'm yeah, let's do it. Let's do this thing and woo. But after that, I'm I wake up and I'm oh, I have to do this thing. I don't feel like doing it. Should I just not do it today? And that's not a good thing for my language learning, to have that feeling of instantly oh, I have to do this thing and I don't feel like doing it. That's kind of why as well, when I took language courses in college or in high school, when I take those courses, I instantly stop studying outside of school. So for example, in middle school, I studied Spanish outside of school because I didn't have Spanish at my school, and I was interested in learning Spanish. And then in high school, I moved to a district that had Spanish, and that Spanish was a language was required. And then instantly, like, even though I had fun in Spanish class at school, I lost all motivation to do anything in Spanish outside of just doing my homework because I had to do this homework or I had to study for the test or had to do this stuff. And then it became an obligation to study Spanish instead of just like a fun thing I was doing in my spare time. Same thing with like Chinese and Japanese in college. I was interested in learning the languages, and so I took the courses. I don't regret taking the courses. I'm still glad that I did that because I don't know that I would have studied those languages outside of college, but I was interested in possibly learning them, so I took the courses to like, force myself to have some interaction with it on a regular basis. And I enjoyed the courses and stuff, but I definitely didn't have any motivation to do anything outside of class while I was taking those classes. So for me, in my language learning personality, having any sort of external factors or any sort of like, you have to do this every day, the obligation factor is bad for my language learning just because it demotivates me. It's good for my language learning in the fact that I feel like I'm being forced to a certain degree to interact with the language and study the language, and therefore all that exposure with the language and practice the language is making me better at the language because of the increased exposure. It's good in that aspect. But in my personal opinion, the most important thing in language learning is always having that motivation and that desire to want to learn. Because ultimately, the more you want to learn and the more that you want to study and feel like studying something, first of all, you're going to enjoy the process a whole lot more, which for me is important. And then second of all, it's like the more fun you're having and the more it's just built on your own desire to study, just in my personal experience, the better the learning goes and the longer you stick with it because it's a positive thing in your mind instead of like an obligation. There are people whose personalities are different than mine, who I think that like the 40-hour in 1 week language challenge can be good for. And after all, it is just 1 week. It's not like every week of your life you're trying to spend 40 hours doing something. And like some people might be motivated by that challenge and that might benefit a lot. So if you're that kind of person, then go for it. If like having trying to reach certain goals or have certain streaks or habits or something, if that is something that motivates you, go for it. Do your thing. You do you. Yay. But for me personally, I know myself enough to know that as soon as I try to make something like a daily requirement for myself or like have a certain quota that's like over 5 or 10 minutes that I have to reach every day, I just lose all gusto and I'm like, oh, I have to do this thing. So that's me. That's why I think I actually would be like, even though I've always thought in the back of my head, just like, oh, it'd be cool if I could learn languages for a living. And maybe if you were paying me, it'd be a different story. Maybe I would suddenly be like, actually, I could do this. I'm motivated because there's the money factor. But since no one's offering to pay me to do this sort of thing, it's all about the enjoyment along with the benefit of learning the language for me. So I'm not going to be doing these challenges anytime soon. But yeah, that's my personal opinion. To answer the question that I asked at the beginning is what was my question at the beginning? I don't remember how I phrased it, but like basically is like, can you study too much or like is learning a language full time bad for you or whatever? The answer is it's bad for me. Whether or not it's good or bad for you just depends on how you study and what motivates you. But if like daily habits / streaks / requirements stress you out, I don't recommend it. I recommend going at your own pace. Find what motivates you and use that to motivate yourself to keep learning a language. That's my advice. So, yeah. That's pretty much all I have to say for today. So, until next time. 안녕.